war machine for you.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Here's Johnny.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
Hi there, my little droogies.
Film Church.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
No lad who has liberty for the first time and 20 guineas in his pocket is very sad, and Barry rode towards Dublin, thinking not so much of the kind mother left alone, and of the home behind him, but of tomorrow, and all the wonders it would bring.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio, the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday, I'm Branden.
I'm Lewis.
And we're here to talk about movies. Each week, Lewis and I alternate picking a film for both of us to watch and discuss, but this week we're continuing our 2023 director retrospective on Stanley Kubrick. We have been watching chronologically the films of Kubrick and discussing them in detail each week. And this week we're discussing Barry Lyndon from 1975 starring Ryan O'Neal. This week we welcome Zach back.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. Zach is here to discuss a film with us this week. He is a longtime guest of the show and pops up every now and again. He recently told me that this is possibly his favorite Kubrick film, but this is the last Kubrick film that Lewis and I have not seen until now. So I thought it would be an interesting discussion to bring two newbies and one oldie onto the show. And then Zach has not seen Eyes Wide Shut, so I think we're going to try to have him back for our final Kubrick episode so that we can kind of do the contrast of, you know...
Flip reverse it on you, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you guys have seen Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, not in a while.
And each of you rank it as your favorite Kubrick film, so...
I don't think so, but we'll see when we get there.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll find out. We will find out. Before we get on with the show, I just want to take a second to say thanks to everybody who's been listening. It's been awesome to have you and grow this congregation. Please keep spreading the word, the holy word of Film Church, and be sure to hit the bell to be notified when we have new episodes every Sunday. Follow us on all the social media channels at Film Church Radio. Check out our YouTube channel where we have extra special content on there. And yeah, thanks for being here. It's time for our trailer section. Normally, Lewis and I will talk about other movies we've been watching this week other than, you know, our main presentation for the day. But since we just had the Oscars a week ago, and Lewis and I haven't had a chance to talk about them yet, I think we're just going to turn this section into an Oscars talk section with the three of us. If you've been listening to us for a year now, last year Lewis and I had a whole episode where we just talked about our Oscar predictions, and then we kind of did like an Instagram live thing during the Oscars, if you want to check out that from last year. And this year we just couldn't make it work. So if you're looking for that, you're not going to find it. You're in the right place if you want to hear us talk about the Oscars.
It's like the carrot in front of the donkey.
The big winner this year was Everything Everywhere All at Once, of course. And as well, if you want to hear Lewis and I's first reactions from when that movie came out, you can go back and listen to our Sergio Leone episode, part 2, A Fistful of Dollars, where in the trailer section of that, we talk about having just seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's about 8 minutes and 40 seconds into that episode. And I think at that time, I mean, that was back in April. Yeah. We could not have predicted that this movie would have gone on to win all the awards at the Oscars. In our minds, it would have been amazing, but it did not seem like the kind of film that would just sweep at the Oscars.
Yeah. No, agreed. I think that, definitely looking back on last year, it was the film of the year. I don't think any other film kind of had that same, movement as Everything Everywhere All at Once did when it came out, and then just continued to grow and grow and grow. It was used as a poster boy, I think, for the anti-Marvel crowd as well. You know, the fact that it came out so close to Doctor Strange and had a similar theme.
I didn't even remember that came out last year.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it was just a really, like, just a heartwarming show to see all these people win after such a long time, you know, especially with the cast that they had. It was so great. And I think well deserved.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy just to see it over the year kind of build up. Because I remember when we went and saw it, I saw it 3 times in theaters within the span of a couple of weeks. Because we saw it together. I was like, that was amazing. And then I had to tell other people to go see it and bring them with me. And then I did it. Yeah, I did that 2 times, you know, was like, let's all go see this. Like, y'all have to see this. And the people I was telling the movie about didn't know anything about it. So it was like, you know, I think a lot of people did the same thing I did and just like kept putting the word out there, like, this is a must see. But how did you feel about it, Zach? I know you weren't. I know it. Oh, you didn't love it as much as Lewis and I, but I don't think you hated it.
No,
either.
I did like the film. I think the last time that we talked about it on the podcast, which I don't think it was that same episode. I think maybe I came on a later episode, and you had maybe just seen it again, and you guys asked me about my thoughts, and I think I said it was okay. And I've still only seen it once, so and I saw it on its original theatrical run, so it's been a while. Yeah. But my response to its winning was I was very pleased because it's a very original and creative film, and the last couple of Best Picture winners, or the last couple of big Oscar movies, the last couple of years, have basically been very boring movies. I won't name names, but for me, it was just exciting to see like an original indie creative film win and be received so warmly, I think. And because you're used to watching the Oscars and kind of maybe you're not, I don't know. For me, I oftentimes find myself rolling my eyes at winners. And this year I wasn't. I was pleased that something very, very original and creative was dominating the awards, and especially with the acting wins. If you count the 3 acting wins for that film, and as well as Brendan Fraser for The Whale, I was kind of happy just that I don't think any of those actors are ever going to be nominated again. Not as a swipe against their abilities, but I don't have so much faith in Hollywood to provide Oscar-worthy roles for these actors, even if they continue. Obviously, they're going to continue working. But either that or they do have Oscar-worthy roles. I'm not sure I have faith in the Academy of recognizing them again. You know, and kind of like, well, you got yours. We got you already. It's okay. So I was just kind of happy because I don't really see any of them winning again, much less being nominated again. So that was really satisfying, just kind of knowing, okay, this was, to me, in my head, I was kind of operating like this is probably their one chance. And I was actually just watching a video earlier with like Ke Quan and Brendan Fraser talking about, because they were both an Encino Man. And Brendan Fraser kind of said in an interview that both of them probably acted those roles like as if they weren't going to get another chance. So, I mean, like at least he was kind of speaking for himself. He was kind of like, I'm never going to get a role like this again. I'm going to put everything into it, you know?
Yeah.
And probably, quite possibly the same for Ke Huy Quan. So they put so much into those performances, and I think that they all deserved their wins. And I'm happy because I don't think they're going to get that chance again.
Yeah.
You know, or I don't know if they're going to be recognized, even if they get further chances to win Oscars. So it was exciting from that kind of standpoint, I think, too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it was, man, I mean, when I first saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was so amazing to see Ke Huy Quan back.
Yeah.
After all of these years, because, you know, we're in our 30s. We grew up watching him in Indiana Jones and The Goonies, and have wondered where he's been.
Yeah.
And to see him not only in just like a fun movie, but also like to see his real acting chops come out in that movie, and then to be recognized for it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just there's not a like there's not a better feeling to watch that guy in all of his acceptance speeches over this award season. It's like he's so grateful and like and humble and positive, and it's a great thing to watch.
I'm gonna rewatch the movie soon, but I seem to remember there's like a part where, like he after one of the first times he kind of changes into an alternate version of himself, the more like alpha version of himself. I think there's like a part where he like looks at Michelle Yeoh and winks, and then like puts his glasses back on and becomes nerdy himself again.
Yeah,
I could be misremembering it, but
yeah,
there is a moment where it's like an acknowledgement from his character on the kind of like the switching of the characters, that's the switching of the versions of himself, that it's like that moment alone is just like, oh my god, this guy is a freaking great actor, you know.
Yeah.
And because he's of course wonderful in it. And I was very happy for Michelle Yeoh too, because like I think she should have gotten nominated for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which got tons of Oscar nominations, won 4 Oscars, didn't get a single acting nomination. And you look at her filmography, and between Crouching Tiger and this, she's an actor who is always working, but I don't think she does not get roles like her role in Crouching Tiger or her role in this very often. And so it's very exciting that she, 1, got the opportunity to play this part, and 2, got recognized for it. Because I don't know if a meaty role like this is going to come her way again. She's got to keep acting, of course, and she'll always be great.
Yeah.
But I don't know if another Oscar nomination is in her future, just because I don't have that kind of faith in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in love with Michelle Yeoh since I was 6. So Sunday was a big night for me. She was Wei Lin in Tomorrow Never Dies. And I saw that when I was 6 and loved her. So it was great. It was great to see. But I know exactly what you mean. I mean, that's what I thought about Fraser especially, was I don't know where he's going to go from here in terms of performance. You know, I think there's a story that Hugh Jackman was telling about working on his latest film, The Son, and he had like a one scene with Anthony Hopkins, and Hopkins was just so happy to be working. He only had like 1 day of shooting, that he showed up before anybody else. He was helping like the lighting crew set up. Like he just wanted to be on set because the roles were drying up, and he won Best Actor 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was very recent.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, especially when you reach a certain age, it's like, okay, it's going to be, you know, side characters or, I don't know, indie films. You know, so if the Oscars are going to continue to hopefully keep pulling from a wider pool, then that's very good. And that's what we should hope for.
Yeah. Well, what did you guys think of the show?
I thought it was good. I mean, overall, I thought that, it was, they scaled back, but we got all the awards. I know that we kind of were texting a little bit. I didn't like that we continually have to keep cutting speeches off to make jokes.
Yeah.
But I understand, people are not necessarily watching for the technical awards.
Yeah.
So, which is a shame.
I felt like the production was just so much better than it has been the last few years, especially last year. I mean, besides, the incident that happened, but, yeah, I remember last year, because we watched the Oscars together, came over to your house and stuff, and we had talked about how they have just gone so far from the Oscars being like this fancy, special, dress up night to just being kind of like a joke and not taking itself seriously and just, trying to appease like
everyone.
It's like the trend has gone to like pranks and insults.
Yeah.
But this year it really felt like they turned it back around and we're like, okay, no, this is a classy night that everybody's waiting for, and like people's dreams are coming true. And I mean, because that's the thing you're there for. You're there to watch people's dreams come true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, if you're just making fun of it and like, oh yeah, your dream is actually stupid and silly, then it's just like, well, why the hell are we doing this? And that's what it felt like last year, but this year it really felt special again.
Well, last year they were like, the hosts were making fun of the films.
Yeah.
Like, and not in a, good-natured, Billy Crystal popping up inserting himself into scenes and doing, bits or whatever. But there was like a joke about not finishing watching The Power of the Dog or something like that,
Yeah.
And it just felt like the people writing the show hated the movies that were there.
Yeah.
Probably hated movies in general, but
Yeah.
We're TV people.
Yeah.
I think it just helps that you get a host that has hosted things before, and that's what they do for a job.
True. Yeah.
It seems tighter. The jokes are probably a little bit. He's probably got a team of writers, Jimmy Kimmel, that he brings across with him to help. Whereas when it's comedians, not necessarily. I don't want to lump everyone in together, but when they're just trying to be edgy, and that's what we got last year was these terrible jokes that were more shocking than funny, and it just kind of, before anything else happened, it just put a full dampener on it. And plus there was no gimmicks this year, which I liked.
Right.
I hate it when they do like, oh, we've got an audience that think they're going to the cinema, but we're going to bring them into the Oscars, and it's like, don't do this. Like, stop. It's not about that. Please stop. So I'm very thankful that none of that happened, and the ratings were high. So hopefully this continues.
Yeah, Kimmel also has like a sort of. I mean, he's hosted the Oscars before, but even beyond that, he has like, I think he used to do like a live show after the Oscars before he was hosting the Oscars, because his show is on the same network, I believe. So he would do like a live show immediately afterwards. There was years ago, and like the week after the Oscars, I think Guillermo del Toro was on his show this week. And brought his Oscar with him like that because Kimmel's in LA. So like I think that was like something that other winners have done in the past. Like the week after the Oscars, I think like Lady Gaga, the year she won, she came on his show as a guest and like had her Oscar with her, and that's kind of like who did may he rest in peace. Who's the basketball player who died? Kobe Bryant.
Yeah,
I feel like a fool for forgetting his name. Kobe Bryant, when he won an Academy Award for a short animated film, and I remember him coming onto Kimmel's show like in the week after, and they made a little like Lakers jersey for his Oscar that they stuck on there, you know. So he has this relationship kind of with the Oscars, even beyond having been a host of it, that makes him a really good fit for it.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, he's the new Billy Crystal, isn't he? It's like when someone you need to rely on. Let's get him out, and that's fine by me. You know, he does a good job. I think his jokes are funny enough to like, you know, push it a little bit and you know, tongue in cheek, but it's not offensive to anybody.
Yeah.
Which is the fine line that we need to tread.
Yeah. Well, anything else about the Oscars that you guys loved? Any winners, any losers, any...
Very happy that Pinocchio won Best Animated Feature. I think it should have been nominated for Best Picture as well, personally. But yeah, that was very heartwarming because it was, I mean, Guillermo doing exactly what he does.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are only so many Best Picture slots and Best Director slots. But I was happy that RRR won.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I've talked about it on your guys' show, but I think I told you guys the weekend I saw that movie, which was like a year ago. I think I texted you guys and said I just saw this. I mean, I saw it like opening weekend in the theater. I was the only person in the theater, but during that song that won the Oscar, Natu Natu is the name of the song, or Nacho Nacho if you watch the Hindi version on Netflix. Unfortunately, there's some very weird, complicated things involving the Indian film industry and language and multiple languages. But like, I mean, I was like doing like a sort of Chaplin tap dance with my feet the whole time. I didn't get up and dance, but my feet were moving during that whole scene. And so I was very happy that song made it, that film got popular enough here that it got enough momentum to get it to that place. I would have loved to have seen that film be recognized as like a Best Picture or a Best Directing nominee. I know that was a pipe dream, but I was just happy that the momentum for its U.S. release pushed it towards actually getting nominated and winning. So
yeah. I mean, their dance performance in the show was incredible.
Well, you should see the movie. I was actually disappointed that the actors from the film did not perform. They were not asked to perform, I think.
Yeah.
But they said they were ready to do it. Which is fine, though, because I think that's also a song that if you listen to it, and even just watching that performance, it's one thing, but it's a song that works with what's happening on screen in the film, most of all. So that was also a thing that sort of gave me hope that it would win, because it wasn't just like an end credits song. It was like, this is actually a pivotal moment in the film, you know? Yeah. And that is often, I think, helpful for a song when it's like many years ago, it's like, maybe it's like 20 years ago now, when It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp won the Oscar for Best Original Song for Hustle and Flow. And I was reading an interview years ago with the director of that film, who said, I knew that we were going to win the Oscar. He didn't write the song, but he's like, I knew the song was going to win when it got nominated, because that movie shows the writing of the song. Like the characters write the song in the movie, and you see it from its gestation of like a couple of notes on a keyboard to a full-blown song. And he was like, none of the other movies, it's a song in the credits. This is like fundamental to the film. He's like, I knew that it was going to win. So I had high hopes for that, for Natu Natu winning, just because it was like, this is more than just a song at the end, you know?
Right. Yeah.
What about you, Branden? What?
I mean, I was just ready for Ke Huy Quan to win. I was just, and it was like right at the beginning. I was just ready to see it. I was rooting for that guy, and like, I've been watching all of his other wins and acceptance speeches, and it just warms my heart.
Yeah.
And just like to see him go up there and win, and just, I mean, it was just amazing.
Yeah.
I'm a little torn because it's like, I love Spielberg. But I mean, he's got his awards, you know.
He's got 3 Oscars.
Yeah, I was actually looking today. I was like, you know, the Daniels in one night they got as many Oscars as Spielberg. I was like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, what a crazy night for those guys.
Yeah, I think that with Spielberg, it just they just went the wrong direction. You know, Michelle Williams' performance is really good, but in my opinion, Paul Dano steals the show. You know, and maybe supporting actor. You know, but then again, like you said, it's a tough category. Every category I feel was tough. You know, I was really pulling for Paul Mescal from After Sun to win, but I knew you know, it was kind of like he was like with Bill Nighy, unfortunately, as like the outsiders in that group. But I mean, that was a big win seeing him get nominated because After Sun was phenomenal. So. Yeah, and he's only going on to do bigger and better things now.
Yeah, exactly.
Better in terms of, I would say, budget and like exposure. Not better as in better films. Just want to clarify.
No, you're talking about he's going to be in Gladiator 2.
Yeah. Better exposure. Maybe not better than After Sun. We'll see.
Well, cool.
A good show. Happy with it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens next year. I'm curious.
I feel like, the COVID years are behind us a bit. I feel like the last few years have been very sparse. You know, every category has been like, okay, well, if you have to. You know, whereas this year I was like, especially with Best Picture, you know, I would have been happy with 95% of the options. I should say 90%. 90% of the options there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a year where there were a lot of movies that I'm like, oh, I wish that had gotten in, but I like wasn't really upset with anything. Everything that got nominated was good.
Yeah, and also like mostly everything that got nominated was, you know, had a big theatrical release and was popular. You know, people went to see these movies.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, last year where people were like, what is Coda? Where do I see that?
Right. And your other big winner, your non-theatrical winner, was a Netflix film, you know, All Quiet on the Western Front, which is also getting a very like high-end home video release. So they're kind of trying to legitimize it, you know. It's not just a Netflix movie. You can buy it in 4K in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. All right. Well,
So,
I think that's it for Oscar talk.
Well, I don't know. The film that we're going to discuss tonight won 4 Oscars.
That's true.
More than any other Kubrick film.
That is crazy. Folks, it is time for our feature presentation. Barry Lyndon, 1975. At long last, Redmond Barry became a gentleman, and that was his tragedy. An Irish rogue uses his cunning and wit to work his way up the social classes of the 18th century England, transforming himself from the humble Redmond Barry into the noble Barry Lyndon. First time watch for me, first time watch for Lewis, several watches for Zach, possibly his favorite Kubrick film. I will say that for me personally, this is a really good movie, right? It looks amazing. It's engaging. I mean, for 3 hours, it's like incredibly engaging.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't, like all the reviews from back then are like, it's long and boring, but it's not, you know, it's an exciting movie to watch. But I've only watched it one time. And when I compare it to other Kubrick films, it's hard for me to be like, this is incredible. But just as a movie, it is incredible. It is a really good movie. I don't think it's going to be necessarily my favorite Kubrick film, but again, this is a movie I'm definitely going to go back to several times, and that might change, So that's kind of where I'm sitting at. How was your watch, Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, this has always been the Kubrick film that stuck out a little bit for me. It's been, it's never felt like it belongs in his filmography for someone that hasn't seen it. Compared to the other films around it, The Shining is next, obviously, and then we've just had 2001 and Clockwork Orange. It seems such a shift. But after watching it, it 100% fits in with the themes of what Kubrick's been doing. Maybe not like the look, but he's been dealing with anti-heroes and, these people that we're not supposed to like as the focal character now since his career started, pretty much. This is kind of what he's drawn to. And after reading about it, I think what you sit in awe of, very similar to 2001, is the technical developments of this film that really pushed the format forward. I always think of Hitchcock, obviously, because he's such an influence on me, and how he would do films like Rope that were like just a test for himself. He would be like, I want to shoot this in like it was a stage play, continuous. And for this, I just feel like Kubrick's like, I'm going to do natural light. And this is and no one can stop me. We haven't got a lens that can pick up, the flickering of candles. I'm going to invent one because this is exactly what I want on camera. It's insane. I mean, just the technical, the technical side of this film is incredible. And I think it's so seamless when you're watching it. It just blows your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. To just kind of talking about the technical achievements of the film. Well, I think a lot of Kubrick movies are kind of fit this category of, well, I mean, I guess, every movie kind of falls into this category in one way or another, where you couldn't make this today. But the thing about what you couldn't do is that I don't think any filmmaker, even the most, the filmmaker with the access today, very few filmmakers, I guess someone like James Cameron has this freedom. Filmmakers don't have the freedom of time to make a film like this anymore, which is that Kubrick had a lot of time to make all of his films, obviously. And I did, for the first time, delve into the special features on the Criterion disc for this movie recently. I've had it for a long time, and I've watched the movie on it a couple of times, but I had never watched any of the special features, and so they do talk about like the lens in particular, right, was a NASA lens that did not fit a normal film camera, and so they had to send Stanley's personal cameras off to the camera company for them to basically rebuild his cameras and build new parts so that this lens would fit in. And that took several months that he was just able to say, we're not filming yet. We're still in pre-production. I've got 6 months for you to build a brand new film gate for the camera, so that this lens fits in it and is able to capture that. And it gets even more stressful when you hear about the shooting and how the focus pullers on these things the focus puller had this whole setup where he had to, they would film or tape the actor in a setup from the side, and he would watch the footage to measure, like, okay, not of actual scenes, but like rehearsals, to measure, like, okay, Ryan O'Neal moves his head forward about 2 inches in this take. So then he would kind of have to guess while he's focus pulling that he was getting it right, because any slight movement, the picture would go out of focus because of how sensitive these lenses were. And just hearing about the shooting with the cameras makes every shot feel like a miracle, that it came out okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we know that Kubrick shoots many takes, so we also know that what we're seeing in the film is only, every take is only one of at least a dozen, that were
Possibly
that were
2
filmed.
dozen.
Right.
Or 4 dozen.
Yeah. And the
Yes.
aspect of that as well, especially by filming by candlelight, is the continuity of the candles.
Yeah.
The budget just rose and rose and rose because they just had to keep replacing the candles. For there's
Right.
these chandeliers above the characters in some of these
Right.
scenes that have got 30 candles plus, and again, I'm sure that they probably had to be changed nearly at every scene, or at least, every half an hour or whatever.
Yes.
And Kubrick, who is very famous for going on and on and on and on,
Right.
just ballooned. The budget just ballooned,
Well, yeah, and like the cameras were also the candles were also very smoky. So
yeah,
they talked about like crew members would get lightheaded because the oxygen was being sucked out of the rooms because of these candles.
Oh my god.
And so between takes, they'd have to open up the room so that the air could get in and people could breathe again because these things were just smoking up the place. And then of course wax is melting, so it's not just an issue of say, oh well, the candle lengths between shots are this and this, but cleaning up the candle wax and replacing them from that point of view of the mess that they're making on the sets, which were not sets, they were real locations. Just it stressed me out.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it had to be absolute pins and needles
Yeah.
the entire time
Yeah.
trying to. But I mean, they shot for 300 days.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it took I mean, they took their time. It's like,
Yeah.
And
the
I don't
houses
know.
they were using, especially like around the Christmas period, they had to take, I think it was like a 2-month break because the families wanted to use the houses for Christmas.
Yeah.
So they were just like, okay, we're done for 2 months, and then they had to come back and continue after that.
Right.
Um,
And the good thing is though, for the not for the candlelit scenes, but daylight scenes, they were able to actually use just like actual film lights if they needed them, because they would film those rooms were situated in such a way that with these big windows, and angled in such a way. So these rooms were designed to be lit by the sun during the day. If you were living in this house, you kept your windows open because that was your source of light during the daytime. So they were able to continue shooting into the night, because I think, especially when they were shooting in like the winter when the days were getting shorter, so they'd have natural light lighting those interior scenes, but then the sun would go down, so they were able to use like arc lights outside the windows, just makes it look like sunlight coming in. So there were there was some semblance of what felt like just a regular old movie set.
yeah.
Little bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
But most of
we're
it
getting,
is very different from any other set you'll ever be on.
Yeah, we're getting more and more removed from the Spartacus days as we go along. It's just becoming like the furthest thing away from Hollywood that he can get, at this point. And obviously a lot of it's filmed in England and Ireland and Scotland and places around there. And it's just got a real feel for someone that's just in love with the place.
Yeah.
Oh my God, some of the compositions of the shots outside are just absolutely gorgeous. With the rolling hills, and it just looks incredible. And I text you guys because I just watched The Searchers, like the day before watching Barry Lyndon, and I was just like, I'm just blown away by the cinematography in both of these films, because it's just the sense of space in both of them is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this movie has a lot of those like kind of like all these like perfect things coming together, right? Like,
yeah.
they talked about with regards to like the production design that originally the plan was they were going to shoot all in England so that they were like never more than half an hour away from Stanley Kubrick's home.
Yeah.
And that it quickly became clear that that was not a realistic plan. So then they shifted over to Ireland, right? And so that's where you get these, amazing landscapes where so much of the cinematography of this is lifted from paintings. I think it was we talked about one painter who Hogarth, William Hogarth, who was a painter who was actually like very cinematic in the way he painted. Like he would do like a series of paintings. Like one was like the Rake's a Rake's Progress. So it would be like they sort of said it's like almost retroactively he was a very cinematic painter before cinema existed, because he would do these paintings that if you look at all 6 or whatever it was, you got a story, you got a progression of a narrative.
Yeah.
And Kubrick is like taking those and actually making them cinematic. But you've got actual landscapes where I can recreate, or not necessarily recreate, but imitate the look of these paintings just by photographing the actual land out here. That's to say nothing of the actual setups, like in the houses where characters are positioned certain ways, to sort of imitate these group paintings that of the 18th century British paintings. But it's the perfect storm of things coming together to make the movie look so good. Is like, we've got the landscape. We just need to find the spot where we can film it and make it look like this painting.
Yeah, I think Gay Hamilton, who plays the cousin early on, talks a little bit. She was saying that Kubrick was, obviously he was meticulous in making sure that he got the right shot, but he really struggled with how to like open the shot, how to kind of the composition for the beginning. Once he'd had that, he could like move with it. And especially with this film, he would refer to the paintings you were talking about, Zach, as like starting points, jumping off. Like that's how he would position the characters before they started filming. Like, so everything had this feel of like, I don't know, like, just like the history that we're familiar with through paintings, I guess. It's like, how can we be, we can relate to it because we've seen these stances and how people are like holding themselves through these paintings before, which is such an interesting way to go about making a historical, period film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think even the production designer Ken Adam, who worked with Kubrick on Strangelove, and he designed the B-52 bomber and the War Room. And after working with him on Strangelove, he said, "I'm never working with Stanley Kubrick again." He hated the experience. He almost said yes to 2001. He was offered the job in 2001, and he thought about it. But when he learned that Kubrick had already been working with NASA for a year, he was like, "I'm not going to be able to be creative on this." So it took some finagling for Kubrick to get him to agree to do this film. And the strange thing is that not that he had his work cut out for him, but he felt like, as far as production design goes, they were using existing rooms, like interiors that really, certain modifications were made. Like I think at the beginning, you see Barry, like the house that Barry and his mother lived in, which is like, it has a stone, like sort of foundation, like the outer part is stone, but it's like a thatched roof. And he built the thatched roof. Like it was just an empty shell of a home that he made it look like this nice little like Irish cottage. But a lot of the work was just finding the locations, finding the rooms that looked like these paintings, and saying, okay, here it is. This is where we're going to shoot, and of course he wins an Oscar for it. So he was actually very, very adamant about trying to convince Stanley to shoot on sound stages, and Stanley Kubrick said no. This is all location shooting. So that was another thing where because he was used to working on sound stages. He was used to having full control of designing a set, and he did not have that on this.
Because he worked on the early Bond films, right, which are very much like these big soundstage kind of set pieces. You think of the Fort Knox and stuff.
Right. He worked on a lot of Bond films, and there's one that they talked about in the special features there where, and you would know this better than I do, Lewis, because I don't remember. Whichever one came out in 1977, there's like a submarine like set.
Spy Love Me.
It's probably that, yeah. Where he had built this set and could not quite figure out the lighting. And he called Stanley Kubrick, even though he had sworn he would never work with him again. They maintained a very good friendship, and he calls him up and is like, I need you to come into L Street or wherever it was and just look at this and help me with this. And Kubrick was like, no, people are going to see me. And he's like, well, go in on Sunday. No one will be there. Wear a coat and dark glasses. And so he went in, and Kubrick actually helped him figure out like where the lights should have been in this Bond set. Wow. So they, as far as I know, they maintained a friendship until they died. But both of them died. Yeah. But I think Kubrick died before Ken Adam did. But the working relationship, which is something that appears pretty consistently across Kubrick's filmography, is that people really like the experience of working with him once or twice. And then after that, it's like, I'm not going through that again.
I feel like it's that retrospect thing. We talked about it last week, right, Branden, with the Clockwork Orange and McDowell, where it was like he was put through like so much pain on that film. But now because Kubrick is, the name, and because the film is as big as he is, as it is, he can kind of, it's kind of tainted a little bit. You look back on it now with fondness because it means so much to so many people. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of people. Like, it was probably hell getting this vision to the screen. But then when you saw the finished product, you were like, okay, it was right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about him, is that there's so many stories of people just kind of thinking that he's crazy, and then realizing that he's actually not, that he's just very smart and knows what he's talking about. I remember like an instance in one of the books I was reading about Kubrick where he comes in and he's able to just look at the light, the way that the gaffers and the director of photography are lighting a scene, and he's like, we're 2 stops off. They're like, no, we're not. We checked it. We checked the meters. Everything's good. He's like, no, 2 stops off. And they check it again, and they're like, oh, he was right. And just like his technical ability and his eye.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess that just comes from his photography background and also just his obsession and his, at this point in his career, he's able to just buy stuff and play with it for years.
Yeah.
And like you said, he was able to acquire this lens from NASA, but the cameras that he bought, he actually got from Warner Brothers, because he did some calling around and found out there was these special, I don't know what kind of, they called them BCC cameras, and they were some kind of rear projection cameras, and they were out of use. They'd switched to like a different type of front projection camera or something. And he was like, do you guys still have these cameras? I just really admire the craftsmanship of them, and I would like to have them. And so he was able to get them, and those are the cameras he ended up using for Barry Lyndon. But one of the technicians at Panavision called up the guy who gave them to Kubrick and was like, what the hell did you do? Like, those are some of like the most amazing cameras ever made. Like, nobody, like, I can't remanufacture those. Like, the craftsmanship in them are like incredible. What the hell did you do? But I mean, he was just, if anybody was going to have him, it should be Kubrick, you know?
I mean, he put them to use. If Warner Brothers
Yeah,
was,
exactly.
phasing them out, who cares about the... I mean, obviously some camera guy
Right.
does, but
Yeah.
better that they get taken and modified to make Barry Lyndon than
Yeah.
just be admired as these artifacts that collect dust.
Yeah, I mean, I know that especially with the lenses, when they were making the film Amadeus, the director reached out and was like, "I really loved the look of Barry Lyndon. Like, can you lend us the camera that you used or the cameras so that we could, capture the same kind of effect?" And Kubrick said something along the lines of, "I worked hard to make this camera, so I'm not going to give it out for free." And he didn't relinquish his control over the camera, and they were like, "That was fine. That was his prerogative." We kind of started looking elsewhere, and then, eventually, while we're making the film, it kind of technology caught up a little bit, and we could still capture it. But yeah, I think he was very protective over his invention and kind of his cameras for this.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's like if that's what you like using, if you can't get it back or they mess it up, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, it's
You're
no
delaying
longer
the next...
unique to you, is it? I mean,
Yeah. Well, you're also delaying the next Kubrick film even longer.
yeah.
Lord knows we don't need it longer delays. So while I was watching this film, I got the feeling that Wes Anderson loves this movie.
Yeah, I think some of the jokes are very Wes Anderson-y. Like the opening, especially with the duel. And it was like...
Maybe Wes Anderson's jokes are just very, very Lyndon-esque.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it got me...
wait, Lewis, you were about to describe the funniest scene, I think, in any Kubrick movie.
The opening duel, where it's describing Barry Lyndon's father, and then we get the gunshot, and the narrator says before he was killed in a duel.
I mean, to me, that just sets the whole tone for the film. And it tells you it's everything you need to know about the movie is in that scene. The way the narrator talks in that, just it's to me it's. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that this was going to be a funny movie. That was my and it is a funny movie, although I don't think I laugh out loud all that much throughout the movie. But it opens with a joke, So I am like going into it with this high spirit when I watch it of like, this is great.
Yeah. Well, it got me thinking, like, I mean, we've been learning a lot and absorbing a lot by doing this Kubrick deep dive and watching all of his films chronologically. It got me thinking that so many of his films are kind of the foundation of so many other films that we watch today.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about that with 2001: Space Odyssey and how that was kind of set the tone for the rest of what cinema became and has become since then. But also, I was watching an interview with Steven Spielberg recently, and he was talking about Clockwork Orange and saying that it was kind of the first punk rock film.
Yeah.
And there's so many movies like that nowadays that you can kind of see that kind of feel and tone, and it's almost its own genre now. And then the same with Barry Lyndon. It got me thinking, like, oh, this is like the foundation for like Wes Anderson or like the Coen brothers, like this kind of comedy, this like serious comedy.
Yeah.
That's still kind of a character study, still, Oscar worthy, like still has amazing acting and stuff, but has this like narration that just kind of like comical at the same time.
Yeah, because it balances it really well. There's still moments in this film where like my mouth is open because I'm like, oh my god, And I think like that Coen brothers comparison is because they do that all the time. Like Fargo and Burn After Reading are two films that can just have you laugh in 1 second and have you like shocked the next. That's a great comparison.
Yeah, I just think it's incredible that I mean, I guess that's why people call him the greatest is because he literally every movie he's not using the same form of storytelling.
Yeah.
Like his way of telling a story is different. Even though like pretty much all of his movies have narration in them, it's not the same. It's like in A Clockwork Orange, the narrator is the character. In Barry Lyndon, it's not. It's very
those
different.
originally supposed to be.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, the novel, which I've never read, but the novel is narrated by Barry, and this maybe is one of the things that attracted Kubrick to it. I don't know that similar to A Clockwork Orange, which is the novel by Anthony Burgess, is narrated by Alex. Lolita is narrated by Humbert Humbert. You have these very strong characters who are unreliable narrators. And that's who Barry is in the novel. Now, there's some... I'm going to say unsubstantiated. I don't know how true these are, but there's rumors about what led Kubrick to decide to actually exclude Ryan O'Neal from narrating the film, which was an alleged... This is coming from Ryan O'Neal's daughter, who was on set during the making of the film. She was a 10-year-old girl, Tatum O'Neal. And allegedly, according to her, in her biography, autobiography, wrote that Kubrick's young daughter had a crush on Ryan O'Neal, because Ryan O'Neal was the most popular actor in America at the time that he made this. And allegedly he would flirt back with his daughter, and when Kubrick caught wind of this, he just became like disgusted with Ryan O'Neal and grew to dislike him, and said, well, we'll figure something else out with the narration. Allegedly. This is
yeah.
But I think it works out for the better, because
exactly
the indifference of the narrator is, to me, one of the funniest things about one of the best and funniest things. The other funny moment with the narrator for me is the end of part 1, where he is talking about the Duke of Lyndon or whatever, he's dying, and it just fades out. He's still talking. He's still narrating about this guy, and it just fades to black and goes away and cuts him off. Intermission. like that's the narration is used very, very well to the benefit of the film. So I think it works out for the better that way.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes Kubrick change his mode of storytelling.
Yes.
Not doing the same old thing.
Yeah. And again, the script was very loose. He'd kind of done that before. 2001 was supposed to be more of a visual thing, and this was again the same thing. It was kind of, the script was very loose, and the whole production was kept completely under wraps. There was nobody allowed on set. Nobody really knew what he was making. The only thing that they were allowed to talk about was that the main actors, Ryan O'Neal and Marissa Berenson, they were the only two people that had been attached to the project, because the book itself was in public domain, and Kubrick knew that if it was leaked, someone would maybe try and make it before him. So it was kind of just completely kept under wraps, and he didn't win many fans in the critics circle throughout this film. This is when he started to be labeled a recluse, because he wouldn't let anyone on set. And the tide started to turn a little bit against him, especially with American critics. He'd left the US, he'd gone to the UK, he wasn't now allowing them onto the set, he wasn't going to tell them anything about the films he were making. So they started to go for him personally a little bit more, in columns and reviews and stuff, which I think carries on until, unfortunately, until the end now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the movie came out, it's a great movie looking back on it now, but at the time it came out, I mean, when was Jaws? Was that the same year? Was that 1974?
It's the same year. Yeah, it's the same year.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, the cinema is like changing completely. I mean, you've already had the two Godfathers come out as well.
Yeah.
The age of the blockbuster is upon the world. And it was not, it was not the right timing for this film necessarily, you know, for it to like make money and be successful, you know, with the amount of money they spent on it.
I think it's deceptive, though. I think, you know, 75 is a big turning point for American cinema, like Jaws,
right?
And Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, I've just pulled up the list here: Shampoo, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and on the outset, I was under the same impression before I watched it. This looks like a stuffy period drama, right? And then, you know, and then you actually see it, and it's not, you know, that's kind of the setting, but it's not that at all. It's actually, you know, it's very in themes about masculinity and you know, these men that kind of will go to any means to get ahead, and society and things like that.
But also, like, when you're coming off of, you know, creating the first punk rock movie and it being very popular amongst young people, this is not going to be attractive to them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with you there. Yeah. And it didn't do very well in America.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it did end up making its money back, right?
I mean, it was very popular in Europe.
Yeah.
France and England and places like that, you know, and did really good business.
Places where they appreciate the filmmaker.
Yeah. I think that, you know, if they had, I think Kubrick himself had estimated that it was going to take a lot more money. You know, he was very he talked a lot about what profits his film would be making when he was making films. And this fell a little bit short, but if it had had the same business in the US as it did everywhere else, it would have broke past his estimate.
It's interesting because the shift to Barry Lyndon was partially to avoid what would be a box office bomb in Napoleon, or a perceived box office bomb, because he was going to make a Napoleon film, and it was the Russian. There was a Russian version of War and Peace at the end of the '60s that was very successful, and then the Russian director of that, and like I think Dino De Laurentiis and American actors did a Waterloo film that just completely bombed, and so he was developing Napoleon, and they were like, his financial backers were like, we're not making a Napoleon movie. This type of movie is gone. So then he makes Clockwork Orange, but then this is obviously he considering how self-conscious he was about box office, he must have believed that there was something here that would attract people, an audience to go see it. And I mean, I think obviously the film's vindicated, right? Because now this is a movie that in the last 10 or 15 years, I feel like is really the first time I've heard people talk so much about it. Like, it's kind of, I think it is a movie that people brush off when they look at Kubrick's filmography, that it doesn't seem as cool as the other ones if you haven't seen it. And so I think it took warming up for a lot of people, time for people to warm up to this and to realize just how, you know, interesting and fun and funny and creative and inventive it was. I mean, obviously, people in the film industry recognized it at the time, because it won Oscars.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of films that don't have the immediacy. It's kind of, you know, it has to kind of drop off to come back again. You know, two of my favorite films of all time, Vertigo and It's a Wonderful Life, both didn't do very well. You know, and then it took, you know, resurgence for them to be, you know, thought of higher. And I think that you're right there, Zach. I think that, you know, the fact that it's been overlooked for so long kind of maybe has the defenders a little bit more adamant than they would have been normally.
Yeah.
But with that, it's brought the appreciation of it up as well. I don't think it's unfounded. I don't think that this is anywhere close to the bottom of Kubrick's filmography. You know,
right.
It's just I understand both sides. I can see why people didn't go and see it, and I can understand why people should have gone and seen it.
Yeah. Well, the movie won 4 Oscars: Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Score, and then it was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay.
Yes. The last time that Stanley would get that trifecta. He got one more Oscar nod after that, I think, for Full Metal Jacket's script, but because from 2001 to this, he's always getting 3 nods. I think 2001's the only one where he doesn't get a picture nomination, but he gets the visual effects nomination.
Yeah.
And
one. But Strangelove, Clockwork, and this all have picture, director, screenplay.
Wow.
So clearly the Academy has them in their, their thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the nomination stage.
One of the things that I really liked to see in the trivia was that Kubrick used to play the soundtrack's classical music during during takes to get actors and actresses in a better mood. And he was reportedly influenced by Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968.
Nice.
Which, of course, we did a whole series on Sergio Leone. And just the fact that, I mean, I feel like I don't hear a lot about Kubrick being influenced by anybody, but just the fact that he was influenced by Sergio Leone, I'm like, cool.
But it's not something you would see in the film. That's the interesting thing. It's sort of like it's like adopting the method, but you don't see the references when you watch the film.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's more interested in like how films are made as opposed to recreating them. How did like Leone get this performance? Maybe I should try that on the next film and see how that works.
I'm also impressed with you mentioned 3 hours that this movie is not like a bore, and I was one of the things I talked about with the editing of this movie was that when they first started editing, again another thing that you only can do when you have the amount of time that someone like Stanley Kubrick has is that for every take they would like lay out all the takes. So let's say it was 15 takes of one line delivery, and they would pick the best one. Okay, and then the next line or the next shot, they'd pick the best take, and so on and so forth. And they'd keep doing that, and then they would edit that together, and they would well, this is terrible, because there was no consistency to the performances, because you'd have take 12 for the first line read, and then take 1 for the next line read, and take 20 for the next line read. And so then they just scrapped that method and managed to still cobble together cohesive sequences. But then I'm also impressed with some of the shots where the editing is basically in the cinematography, like the zoom outs, the zoom ins, that is editing without editing, right? It's like editing without cutting, that they're able to kind of that they were able to figure out on set that this shot is going to go on for this long and it will pace perfectly, and then that they were able to cut this together. I don't know. Again, hearing about it gave me a migraine. I would hate to be making a movie this way, and it's so it's amazing that someone as smart as Kubrick, or who is also probably surrounded by people who know this technology so well and trust him, that they can still figure it out and make a movie that is paced very, very well. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a watch checker for me. I'm just like sucked into it right away. Even when the intermission comes, I'm like, I'm ready. I don't want to get up and go to the bathroom. I'm ready for part 2. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what you were saying there, that one of the Kubrick's like trademarks, I guess, is kind of honed in this film, is that zoom out. The focusing on something so far off in the distance, and then we get the very long zoom out until
and
we
you
can see everything around it.
Yes, and you have all this surrounding material, other characters, other things going on, and that continues to tell the story. And then the duel at the end of the film,
my favorite
is
bit.
like one of the best. Just like that is, if I were teaching film editing and if I were teaching tension, like that is a sequence I think I would want to teach. You know.
That's the scene I was alluding to earlier with my mouth just hanging open when they were like, well, you've taken your shot. Now it's time for Master Lyndon. It's like,
yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah, and like as far as the character goes, I mean, we've gone with, you know, Barry through this whole journey. And, you know, at this point, you're just kind of like, he's kind of a dick.
Oh, he's
I was going to say,
he's such a prick.
Yeah, do you like Barry?
Yeah, it's like, not really. But at the same time, you have all this sympathy for him, you know, because you followed him throughout his whole journey. And then he ends up, you know, doing kind of this noble thing.
Yeah.
It's like the one nice thing that he does, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also it's like, okay, well, he's got really nothing left to live for.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And,
I think that, you know, for the first half of the film until the intermission, he's not really like, you know, like villainy. You don't boo and hiss when he's on. He's just pretty ineffective. He just kind of wanders around. Yeah, exactly. He just takes the opportunities that are presented to him.
Right.
It's the scene in the carriage where he blows the smoke back at Lady Lyndon that you're just like, oh no, you've just kind of gone a little too far now for me to like you. You know?
Yeah.
But I did like the scene where they found him with, I assume it was the nanny in the garden, and he spots them. And just a very cartoony kind of shock on his face.
It's interesting that, I mean, I'm assuming this is probably taken directly from the novel, I don't know. But part 2 is titled Containing an Account of the Misfortunes and Disasters which befell Barry Lyndon. And I remember thinking, like, when that comes up, I was like, was the first part like about his rise? Like, what was the title of the first part? Because like up to that point, he's really had nothing but misfortunes and disasters. You know? And it's like setting it up as like, oh, there's more misfortune and disaster in his future, and that's it.
He's just fallen up.
Right, because part 1 is not like about like how it's by what means he acquired the style and title. But that does not imply that the opposite of misfortune and disaster necessarily.
I just like that he blanks. I just like, especially when he, is it the Germans, the other side of the army that they're on, and he kind of goes back and they're having a meal together. And even when they're like, arrest this man, he's like, no, I'm taking this note to see this, to see this general. They're like, he's been dead for 6 months. and he's still so adamant.
And then it's like, oh, you can't put me in prison. I'm enlisting.
Yeah. Oh dear.
I'm sorry if you guys have points that you're trying to make, and if I'm taking this off.
No, not at all.
Because just in rewatching this, because I watched it again yesterday, and I haven't. It's been a while since I've seen any of Kubrick's films. Like it's been a minute since I've watched any of them, and I was reminded of how great, like, the small supporting characters often are in Kubrick's movies, based almost entirely on the casting of them. I like the captain that he has to compete with the affection for his cousin. That actor who I'm gonna get his name wrong. Is that Godfrey Quigley? Is that who that is, or is that the guy who's friend? That might be the guy who's friendly with him. Oh God. Yeah, maybe that is him. Okay, I don't know the actor. I'm gonna get him wrong. But he has just this sort of cartoon. He's like a cartoon British villain. In his delivery, even the way his face looks, and the whole film is peppered with those characters. I mean, even Lord Bullington is just this like. Obviously, the actor who plays Bullington becomes one of Kubrick's like lackeys after this.
Yeah,
one of his assistants. But that's his first role, and I think the only other acting role that guy did was he's in Eyes Wide Shut with a mask over his face.
Yeah.
But he is such an actor where I'm just like, where did you find this guy? Because he's so like he's very good at making Bullington he's not likable either. He is such a twerp, But you're kind of like, well, I mean, he's right to challenge Barry to a duel. And
he's got a point.
His win, when he wins, it's kind of like, okay, good on him. Now he's the one writing his mother's checks.
Yeah,
but
justice has been done, I guess.
he's so good at making the character this twerp that he is.
Yeah,
And all of the officers, they're all like that. The Chevalier, who I think is the novelist from A Clockwork Orange, covered with all that, Victorian makeup or whatever.
Oh, really?
Okay,
yeah. He's the novelist who, gets victimized in A Clockwork Orange. But again, just these guys with like great voices and great faces that fill out the roles, and that helps make the whole movie so much memorable too.
Yeah, it's like Philip Stone as well. I mean, he's been popping up. I mean, he was in Clockwork Orange as Dad, and then he pops up again here, and then he's obviously is it Grady in The Shining? He's just got a face that I know because we've seen him a lot, but you just recognize him, As Branden and I were talking about earlier when I did a rewatch of the Indiana Jones films, he's in Temple of Doom. I was like, Kubrick's using him again. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't a Kubrick film. But my mind was just so...
I did notice, because I've seen... I mentioned that this might be my favorite Kubrick movie. I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's like a part of that might become it's one of my least seen, and I really enjoy watching it and kind of discovering new things in it every time I watch it. Whereas some of the other films, I've seen The Shining so many times, that it does kind of play like beats for me, where it's like, oh, I know what happened. I know. I don't know if there's more secrets or just more little details that will unravel in that film for me. Yeah. But I've seen The Shining enough to hear a line in Barry Lyndon on my most recent watch where I was like, they say that in The Shining too. And it's the phrase, all the best people. It's the guy who, when he's trying to like get a title, and the guy is saying like the people in his company they might not be the smartest or whatever, but all the best people. And that's what the manager at the Overlook says about the guests who stay there. So now I'm just like, is that a phrase from the novel Barry Lyndon, or did Kubrick just make that up? And is he referencing himself, or is he just being repetitive? But it stuck out to me.
I mean, we've talked about this. I don't think anything is inconsequential in a Kubrick film. Yeah. I don't think there's anything there by mistake.
Right.
So I'm sure, maybe it's just more for him to think about the clientele that would be at this hotel would be, people of a higher status, potentially. Right. And he just links that to people trying to get a title in 1777 England or whatever,
Yeah. It's kind of like a class ascension. That's like a thing that seems to be going on here, right? Like that's what's happening in this movie. But now I'm thinking of The Shining too, and I won't steal your conversations for next week. But you know, the guests at The Shining are the people with titles. You know,
well, Clockwork Orange,
the lowly, you know, winter caretaker is your Barry Lyndon type. Who, you know, maybe he gets to walk around in the you know, the room and pretend. But
I mean, Clockwork Orange, you know, class as well. Alex doesn't. He's not, you know, necessarily in a great place. You know, when we see the apartment block that he lives in, you know, there's debris everywhere, and the lift's broken. You know, and that's probably.
But he's also not homeless.
He's not
and
homeless.
He terrorizes homeless people.
Well, it's always that one step up, isn't it? It's like he's terrorizing the people below him. He gets terrorized by the people above him.
Right.
You know, he gets caught when he attacks someone from a higher social class.
Yeah, this movie also kind of has a similar like progression to that film. Right? It's been a while since I've seen Clockwork Orange, but there's kind of that like there's a rise and fall of these characters.
Yeah.
You know, there's a turning point where they've done nothing but you know, revealed themselves as dirtbags, and then there's the second half where maybe there's some kind of a redemption, or not that Barry doesn't have this redemption, but there is this like I'm a man of culture, you know.
Because we talked about this, Brandon, last week with Alex. Is like you don't like him, but you're still rooting for him to you know, to escape these confines, and get better. And it's the same with Barry. You know, towards the end. So I don't want you to die. I just want you to kind of, you know, get your comeuppance a little bit.
I don't know. I don't know if I was ever rooting for Barry as much as I was, and I don't know how much this has to do with Ryan O'Neal's performance. But I wanted to know what happened to him. Whether or not I was rooting for him, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like. But there's a point where you're like, I gotta see what happens to this guy next.
Yeah, because he's just on like such a like every. I mean, for a 3-hour movie, it's got so many landscape changes and twists in the story to where you really don't know where it's going next.
Right.
And it's just interesting because like you know that. Before it has a chance to even start to get boring, it switches it up.
Yeah. And he's even robbed in the most gentlemanly way possible.
Yeah. So Lewis was talking earlier about Indiana Jones, and another Kubrick and Indiana Jones crossover that I found out about this was the guy that fights him in the, you know, that when he's like bickering with him early on when he joins the military, and then they have like a fist fight, which is a great scene. I mean, when that whole scene started, I was like, oh man, don't fight this guy. Like this guy is gonna whoop your ass.
Well,
like,
and
he's a big built dude. He's got this huge gash in his arm. Like he's got a chunk of meat out of his arm.
Well,
it's like
I just love how brash Barry is, where the guy is like, ask him about his wife. And he just like ad-libbing, like, I heard you, I don't remember what the character is, Mrs. Potter or whatever. Why did you ignore her when she came to the camp? You know, like, like without hesitation.
Yeah. So I was, I mean, that whole scene is great. And then like, you know, they have this, you know, fight. And then at that point, I'm really rooting for Barry at that point, because you're like, oh, he's kind of a badass. He just kicks this guy's ass. He's a good fighter. And then, so I was like, who is this guy that he fights? And he is in all 3 Indiana Jones films.
Okay.
He plays the big guy that Indy fights by the airplane, and then he gets like chopped up in the by the propeller. and then he plays the guy that he fights on the conveyor belt in Temple of Doom.
Okay.
And then his like cloth gets caught and he gets, taken under the thing and gets squashed. And I'm not sure who he's credited as he's in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I found a picture, but I can't place. I don't really remember. I got to rewatch that movie and see if I can find him.
Not Raiders.
Oh, I mean, he's also in Last Crusade.
Last Crusade.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just thought that was cool. That Spielberg was like, okay, he's got to fight this guy from Barry Lyndon, and then he was so good that he's like, okay, we're gonna make this a thing where he fights him in every movie.
Well, in Clockwork Orange, the author in the second half of the movie, his like personal assistant who like carries his wheelchair.
Yeah.
That's David Prowse. That's Darth Vader.
Oh shoot!
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's the guy in the Darth Vader suit.
Oh my god, I did not know that. Go. That's amazing.
That's cool.
So
yeah,
I mean,
got
I guess
like shorts on. Yeah, and he's like super muscular.
Yes. So I mean, I guess these guys are stunt guys. I assume.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, all three of those guys were friends. I mean, Lucas, Spielberg, Kubrick. They're all also into technology and pushing the. Yeah.
Right.
They're calling each other up and being like, "How did you do this in this movie? And who are your people?"
Kubrick's like, "None of your business."
Yeah.
Well, it's probably Kubrick sending them faxes at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
What else? Is this it? Any other tidbits?
Well, apparently, I guess when he was doing a lot of his research was done when he was trying to make Napoleon.
Right.
So he kind of had a lot of the research taken care of when he decided that this was going to be the next film. But apparently, he had all these like art books, and he would flip through them, and when he saw a painting, like a picture of a painting that he was like, oh, I want to use that, he would rip rip it out of the book so that he could then file it away, and he felt really guilty apparently about destroying these books this way. And I guess all these books are like not in print anymore. I mean you can still find books of what is it, Hogarth, the all these painters, you can still find their books, but he was just like apparently felt very like every tear, like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I feel terrible about ripping up these books, but he's finding the pictures that I'm like, oh, that's a shot, and filing it away.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I think this does set I once had a friend ask me if there was like a specific genre or a subgenre type of film that I am just totally like adverse to ever seeing. And I have a real dislike overall of historical costume dramas. At least the ones made within like the last 30 to 40 years, because those mostly seem to feel like movies that are designed to win an Academy Award for costumes and maybe acting. And this is a movie that probably like sets the standard for exceptions for me, as far as those go, because I love this movie. And then I think of movies that fit in that same, obviously it's a very broad brush historical costume drama, but you mentioned Amadeus earlier, Lewis. I love that movie. And there is it definitely feels like it has some of Barry Lyndon in its DNA. And then recently, a few years ago, there was a movie called The Favorite, which like that has stuff that feels like ripped straight out of Barry Lyndon in a good way. Like that is a film that it does the same thing with humor and weirdness and some great sets and cinematography, and so it's like this has set the bar of that kind of movie for me, because I'm almost going to just like stick my fingers in my ears and shut my eyes if a historical costume drama comes out, because it's usually I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But every so often you get ones that are these. I mean, obviously the story has a lot to do with it. A lot of historical dramas are just like this king or this queen or this prince, and that's not particularly interesting to me. But the story in The Favorite with a queen who has these two women and so on and so forth, that's interesting. Amadeus, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It helps that they aren't necessarily trying to be accurate representations of history. That might also play a part into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like The Favorite too. I hadn't thought about that while watching it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it again sometime. Because I think I only saw it once, but definitely very, very Lyndon-esque in its execution.
Yeah. I've got two little tidbits there I just want to add before we start wrapping up. I mean, Kubrick was very stressed throughout this and started to get rashes on his hands towards the end of production because it was just going on for so long, and all the work that he had done. And there's a great story from the production designers about what it was like working with Kubrick, where they basically kept going to him and trying to bother him about questions they had, and he kind of kept trying to deflect it. Wasn't that interested, and they were like, "Is there any way that we can just get your response to these questions? What do we need to do?" And he's like, "Okay, you can ring a bell. If you need my help, we can ring a bell." And they're like, "Okay, we'll go and get a bell." And he's like, "No. We're going to test every bell and buzzer possible until we find one that isn't irritating to me." And they said that they started importing different kinds of bells and buzzers. And in the end, they were like, "Oh, forget it. I can't be this is ridiculous. I can't be bothered." So they just stopped asking him. And he kind of got what he wanted because he didn't want to be bothered while making it. But it also just shows there was nothing that could just be grabbed.
Simple.
It was it had to. Yeah, exactly. It had to be exactly the way he wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It must have been hell trying to work for him.
Well, I don't want to disparage Ryan O'Neal with slander any further than I already have, but I do think it's fascinating that before this he had Love Story in 1970, which was the highest grossing movie of 1970, got an Oscar nomination for it. It's also, for a number of years, was one of the highest grossing films of all time, even adjusted for inflation, which is just weird. Then he does two Bogdanovich movies, What's Up, Doc, which I love.
Me too.
And Paper Moon. And then he does this. And he credits Barry Lyndon with basically ruining his career. His career never recovered from Barry Lyndon. Because he did a Walter Hill movie after this, The Driver, and he did keep doing some Bogdanovich films, but his star just completely what do they call when a star explodes and extinct? It's extinct. Is that what it's called? His star was extinct.
Fizzled out. Yeah.
Fizzled out. Yeah. But he did his youngest. He has 4 children. His youngest son he named Redmond. I have no idea if that's a reference to this.
It's got to be,
could it
right?
not be?
Yeah, it feels like it has to be, but so
that's the son that he hates.
My son is called Barry Lyndon. It's no reference to the film I was in.
My understanding is that Ryan O'Neal does not have very good relationships with any of his children, but we don't want this to be a.
I'll cut that part out.
A scandal sheet. I'm sorry.
I mean, I would be surprised if anyone turned, an hour and 30 minutes into our Barry Lyndon episode, got that far into it and then turned, what we said into a scandal. I dare you to do it.
Well,
anybody that's made it this far.
As I understand it, Ryan O'Neal was a difficult actor to work with, a difficult person in life on set. So maybe matching him with a difficult to deal with director like Stanley Kubrick was a bad mixture. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the movie turned out good.
Yeah.
It did. and I mean, if Ryan O'Neal is like allegedly an unlikable guy in real life, he does a great job in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Redmond Barry is a scoundrel that you enjoy watching his scoundrelings.
Yeah.
Did you get both of your tidbits out, Lewis?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's time for us to guess what we all rated the film. I think Zach rated it a heart.
I think I rated it a heart too. Yeah.
I did.
Lewis, I think you rated it a 4.5.
Okay. I think you rated it a 4.
All right. What do you think, Zach?
I'm going to say 4 for both of you.
All right. It was 4 for me.
It was 4 for me as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was a little higher.
Yeah, I think
it.
When you do when do you do the rankings? You guys aren't doing separate rankings. You're sort of
no. We're doing like an overall.
Okay.
We're trying to come to a compromise.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Interesting.
Yeah. So right now it's 2001: Space Odyssey at number 1, then Passive Glory, then Doctor Strangelove, Clockwork Orange, The Killing, Killer's Kiss, Lolita, Spartacus, and Fear and Desire at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is getting really hard every week.
Yeah, I think
because none of these movies are necessarily bad.
No.
With the exception of like Fear and Desire, but like, it's like, yeah, how do you rate them against each other?
I'm putting it now in my head of like, which if I was putting these like the films together in the ranking, which one would I want to watch again? And that's kind of like right now. I know that would change over time. Personally, I would put this above Clockwork Orange.
I
think it's better than Clockwork Orange.
Okay. But you wouldn't put it above Doctor Strangelove?
No, I wouldn't.
I feel like Clockwork Orange is better.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a tough call.
Yeah. I feel like would you put it between Clockwork Orange and The Killing?
I feel like that's where I naturally want to put it.
Okay.
Right now. Yeah.
I mean, I would be happy with that. I feel like I've kind of influenced
You've won
you
a lot.
more. Yeah. Yeah.
You've got a lot of wins on this list.
I'd be fine with that,
Okay. All right.
Cool. I think that's the easiest one we've done. And is this? Would you say this is your favorite Kubrick? That I know that we've kind of like talked about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of in the last few years that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like I can't rank films. Like if you're talking about two films, I can usually be like, oh, I like this one more than the other one. But once you start getting into someone like Stanley Kubrick, and there are many filmmakers and writers and artists who kind of have the same thing. Where I'm just like, there are, almost all of their body of work is great. Where ranking becomes almost immaterial because my favorite Kubrick film will be different 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And it will just be kind of like where I'm, and same with my favorite movie. It'll be wherever I'm at in life and whatever I've been watching. As I said, this is one of my least watched ones. So, like, when I was a teenager, I watched 2001 and Doctor Strangelove and A Clockwork Orange a lot. And
Yeah.
I still like watching those movies, but I can quote along with it. I can, well, not 2001, but I know the beats of the film so well. So a couple years ago, I was watching this and kind of felt like this might be the best one, and maybe I felt that way because it was just fresh to me. Where
Yeah.
every time I watch it, I'm kind of rediscovering new things about it.
Yeah.
And it was that way with other Kubrick films before, but less so as I get older or watch them more. And it's weird because I almost want to say, like, ranking Kubrick or naming your favorite Kubrick feels like it should come down to, like, well, are you like a horror person or a sci-fi person?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, well, like I said, I'm sort of not a fan of historical costume dramas, and yet the historical costume drama has kind of found its way into my favorite spot, of these movies. So.
Speaking of which, one of the top reviews on Letterboxd is from Silent Dawn, and they said, showed this to my mom today. She thinks 2001: A Space Odyssey is the most boring film of all time. She walks out of A Clockwork Orange, and she never ceases to complain about every aspect in Doctor Strangelove, and yet she was utterly entranced for every second of Barry Lyndon laughing and crying along with the ravishing imagery and the remarkable storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a Stanley Kubrick film for everyone.
Excellently put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you should follow Silent Dawn. I follow him. He's
Me
a good
too.
writer.
Oh, you do?
He's a good
Okay,
writer.
cool.
He's a very good writer.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. Doing it right now.
Talking of Kubrick films for everyone, though, Branden, what are we watching next week?
Next week, Lewis, we are watching The Shining from 1980.
This is the
Get
Kubrick
ready.
film for me. So, I'm excited.
Should watch that.
Yes.
Room 237 for
Yes.
for extra credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The longer that film, Room 237, goes on, the more my eyes roll, because I feel like they start off like with believable things, and then it's like
my
it
final
just gets ridiculous.
My final consensus is they're all correct.
Yeah.
They're all correct. That's what makes The Shining so great.
Films are subjective.
Exactly.
So you can take whatever you want from this film.
Exactly.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the show, everybody. Of course, you can find us on all the social medias at Film Church Radio, or you can follow us individually on Letterboxd at Selman Scope and at Walker Lewis 3007 to keep up with what we've been watching and what we've been rating things, and just little extra reviews on there. Please keep up with us on all good podcast platforms and on YouTube as well, and let us know what we should watch in the future. Should we do another director deep dive, and who should we do it on? With that, I think there's only one thing left to say. Barry had his faults, but none could say of him that he was not a good and tender father. He loved his son with blind impartiality. He denied the boy nothing. It is impossible to convey what high hopes Barry had for young Brian, or how he indulged in 1,000 fond anticipations of the boy's future success and the figure in the world. But fate had determined that Barry should leave none of his race behind him, that he should finish his life poor, lonely, and childless.
On that note.
On that note, so sad.
Can I stop recording?
Sure.
Or do you,
Amen.
Or do you want to catch
Amen.
Oh, amen. Sorry.
It's okay.
Get
Got
me
you off
out of
guard.
this podcast.